Beneath the ruins of a forgotten storeroom at the Iraq Museum, hidden amidst the chaos left by the 2003 war, lies tablet IM 96891. To official records, it is merely a Sumerian literary piece from the 3rd millennium BCE, but the story of its discovery in 1937 suggests something far deeper. It didn't turn up on a shelf, nor among the rubble of a library. It was extracted from a sealed jar that someone, more than 4,000 years ago, decided to bury underground before even the first stone was laid for what would become a scribal school in Nippur. Think about it. It wasn't left there carelessly. Someone chose to bury that text beneath the foundations of a place dedicated to learning. It was a deliberate act, a kind of ritual or symbolic foundation. It is fascinating to imagine that ancient scribe placing the jar in the earth, ensuring that before knowledge began to be taught above ground, there would be something sacred protecting the base of the building. It is an origin story that connects the distant past with our present curiosity. The Iraq Museum received the tablet in 1937 and assigned it the reference IM 96891. A preliminary examination carried out that same year resulted in a 2-page assessment, which noted that the tablet was in excellent physical condition, that the irregular writing was standard Sumerian of the period, and that the text appeared to be a first-person literary account attributed to the god Enki. The assessment indicated that a complete translation would require specialized attention. Such attention was not provided until 1971. That year, Dr. Fadil al-Nashef, chief curator of the Iraq Museum, spent 4 months producing a complete translation of document IM 96891. His translation consists of 31 pages, which were typed, bound, and filed in the museum's translation archive. It was never submitted for publication. Al-Nashef retired in 1983. Upon his retirement, he gave an interview to an Iraqi cultural magazine in which he was asked about his most significant professional work. He mentioned 3 projects. AM 96891 was not among them. In 2001, a visiting researcher from the Oriental Institute of Chicago named Dr. Nashef's translation while conducting archival research at the Iraq Museum. She requested permission to photograph it, but was denied. She submitted a formal request to the museum's Scholarly Access Committee, which acknowledged receipt. She received no response before the 2003 conflict. Following the conflict, the section of the archive containing al-Nashef's translation was among the damaged areas. The post-conflict museum inventory indicates that the translation's location is uncertain. The tablet itself, number 96,891, is listed in the post-conflict inventory as having been moved to a secure storage facility before the conflict. It is not on public display. Its current location within the museum's secure storage system has not been publicly disclosed. What is publicly known is the 1937 preliminary appraisal, a partial summary of al-Nashef's translation that Weiss included in a footnote to a 2002 article on first-person Sumerian literary texts, and a reference in a 1989 Iraqi academic journal to a tablet in the Iraq Museum's collection that the author describes as the most complete surviving example of what he calls the Testament of Enki tradition. The Testament of Enki tradition, a tradition of Sumerian texts written in the first person by Enki, the god of wisdom, water, creation, and practical knowledge, in which Enki speaks directly about the nature of the world, the history of his interactions with humanity, and the future he foresees for the civilization he helped to create. Most of the tablets in the Enki literary tradition are well known: the Eridu Genesis, the Atrahasis epic, the text on Enki and the world order, the various accounts of Inanna's descent in which Enki plays a role, and the Enki and Ninmah creation text. These texts have been extensively translated, analyzed, and debated. IM 96891 is not among the texts that have been thoroughly analyzed. According to sources that cite it without translation, IM 96891 is described as differing from known Enki texts in one specific aspect. Known Enki texts describe events that have already occurred: creation, the flood, the establishment of civilization, and specific interactions between Enki and human figures. IM 96891 describes events that have not yet occurred. It is written in the first person, in the voice of Enki, using the standard Sumerian prophetic future tense. In this document, Enki describes what is to come, what awaits humanity, what awaits the world he helped create, what he knows will happen, and what he intends to do about it. Now, let's establish what the available sources tell us about the content of IM 96891. The preliminary 1937 appraisal tells us almost nothing beyond the physical description and the first-person attribution to Enki. Weiss's footnote in his 2002 article is the most specific public source. The footnote states verbatim, Alnachev's translation of IM 96891, which I was unable to photograph but was allowed to read in the archives of the Iraq Museum in 2001, presents what appears to be a first-person account by Enki. It describes a future sequence of events that will affect humanity. The narrative is divided into 7 sections, each corresponding to what the text calls a condition or phase. The first 3 sections describe conditions that the text implies are in effect at the time of its composition, or will be in effect within a foreseeable time frame. The last 4 sections describe a sequence of events that the text presents as an inevitable consequence of the conditions described in the first 3. The language used is administrative rather than prophetic in the religious sense. The text reads less like a prophecy and more like an informational document. Al-Nashaif, whom I was also unable to photograph, described the tablet as unlike any other Sumerian text he had encountered in his 40 years of working with the corpus, an informational document. This is how Weiss describes the language of IM 96891. It is not a prophecy, nor a divine revelation, nor a mythological narrative, but an informational document in the administrative record of Sumerian events, written in the first person by Enki, describing what happens next. Now, let's analyze the content of the reference from the 1989 Iraqi Academic Journal. The article, written by Dr. Hassan Karimi of the University of Baghdad, focuses primarily on the Enki literary tradition as a whole. It examines the known texts of Enki and their relationship to one another. But in the final section of the article, Karimi describes what he calls the terminal text of the tradition, the text that, according to his analysis, completes the Enki narrative arc that runs through all the other Enki documents. He identifies IM 96891 as that terminal text, the text that brings the Enki tradition to its conclusion, and describes its contents in terms that expand upon the footnote about the vice. Karam states that the first section of IM 96891 describes what he translates as forgetting, a condition in which humanity has lost the knowledge bestowed upon it at the dawn of civilization. This is not a loss caused by destruction or catastrophe, but rather a process the text describes as the normal accumulation of distance. The progressive separation between the original transmission of knowledge and the population that received it. As generations pass and the original transmission becomes increasingly mediated by interpretation, tradition, and institutional management, the knowledge does not disappear. It becomes unrecognizable as what it originally was. The foundational knowledge of Sumerian civilization, the technical, astronomical, medical, mathematical, and organizational knowledge attributed to Enki's transmission, survives in the culture. But it survives in a form so transformed by centuries of religious and mythological superimposition that the civilization that possesses it no longer recognizes it as the practical and operational knowledge it once was. A civilization built on a foundation it can no longer comprehend. The second section describes what Karimi translates as filling up, a condition in which the world is so populated that it places specific pressures on the systems of governance, resource allocation, and social organization that the foundational knowledge was designed to manage. This is not overpopulation in the modern demographic sense, but a specific qualitative condition, a world where the number of people and the speed of their interaction have outpaced the systems of government originally designed for a smaller, more leisurely civilization. Systems designed for a world of thousands managing a world of billions. The same administrative vocabulary appears here as in the Epic of Atrocrosis, the text in which the clamor of humanity becomes so great that the gods cannot sleep. The noise of humanity, not literal noise. The Sumerian compound for this condition in the Anthropocrasis is the same one used in administrative texts to refer to an unmanageable administrative burden, a workload that has exceeded the capacity of the management system designed to handle it, a world that has outgrown the administrative capacity of its founding design. The third section describes what Karimi translates as the forgetting of the agreement, a specific condition in which humanity has lost the memory not only of the knowledge transmitted to it, but also of the conditions under which it was transmitted. The agreement between humanity and its creators, the terms of the relationship, the obligations of both parties. The world of IM 96891, as described by Enki in these first three sections, is a world that has forgotten who it is, has outgrown the systems designed to manage it, and has lost the memory of the founding agreement that defined its relationship with its creators. These are the three conditions, and Karimi says that IM 96891 presents them not as moral failings or divine punishments, but as foreseeable results of the passage of time applied to the original design. Expected results anticipated in the original design leads us to the fourth section, the beginning of what the text describes as the answer. Karimi's article describes the fourth section as the most significant passage in the Enki literary tradition. The quote is direct. There is only one direct quote from IM 96891 in the public literature, Karimi's initial passage of the fourth section. In his translation it says, "I did not finish what I started, nor do I abandon what I did. When conditions are as I have described them, the first return will not occur as before, but as it must now. Those who bear what was given to them will recognize the sign. Those who were placed there to remain will emerge, and what was sealed will be opened. I did not finish what I started, and I do not abandon what I did." This is the only direct quote from IM 96891 in the public record, a sentence in a 1989 Iraqi academic journal that is not fully digitized, in an article that has been cited 11 times. Now let's examine the content of this passage. The first return will not be as before, but as it must be now. A return is not the first time something happens. A return is something that happened before and happens again, but adapted to current conditions rather than replicating the original form. Those who carry what they were given will recognize the sign. Two elements. First, the people who carry something that was given to them. The Sumerian compound for carrying what was given uses the same vocabulary as administrative texts describing hereditary transmission. Not the transmission of ownership, but the transmission of a specific custodial responsibility. Those who inherit a custodial responsibility, perhaps assuming it without fully understanding its implications, will recognize a sign, a specific sign, that will identify them to others. This is the moment the custodial responsibility transitions from latent to active. Those who were placed to remain will emerge, deliberately placed in a location to stay there until the signal, and they will emerge from wherever they were placed, and what was sealed will be opened. The same sealing vocabulary that appears in A07056, the permanent sealing of those below after the ocean conflict. The same vocabulary related to roofing appears on the reverse of coin BM92687, the tall ones that were buried before the waters rose. The same vocabulary related to roofing appears throughout the Sumerian textual record in every context where something significant was placed somewhere and protected from the ravages of time until a specific future condition was met. What was sealed will be opened when the three conditions described by Enki are met, when the forgetting, the filling, and the forgetting of the agreement have become actual. Now let's address the fifth section. Karimi doesn't quote it directly, she summarizes it. The fifth section describes what will be revealed again. What the opening of what was sealed will return to humanity's accessible knowledge is not new knowledge. The original knowledge, the foundational transmission, becomes accessible again in a form that the civilization of the return period can actually use, rather than a form preserved in cultural memory as mythology. Practical and operational knowledge that became unrecognizable through centuries of religious imposition, restored to its original form, accessible to the population that now has the scientific, intellectual, and organizational capacity to receive it as what it really is, instead of what the intervening centuries made of it. Karimi points out that the fifth section uses a specific vocabulary for this restoration process. This vocabulary combines Sumerian terms for recognition and remembrance with the administrative term for the retrieval of something that has been held in safekeeping, not new knowledge being handed to an unsuspecting recipient. Knowledge held in safekeeping is returned to its rightful heir when they are ready to receive it as it is. The sixth section describes what happens after the restoration of foundational knowledge. Karimi summarizes it as a period he calls recalibration, the adjustment of the systems, structures, and practices of human civilization to align with the restored knowledge, and not a catastrophic replacement of the existing civilization. A recalibration, the existing structure of human civilization adjusted, reoriented, realigned with the original design. The Sumerian vocabulary for this process uses the same administrative terms as the recalibration of weights and measures. This was the standard administrative process in Sumerian civilization, by which measurement standards were verified against official references and corrected when a deviation occurred. A technical recalibration of civilization with respect to the original reference standard that is being restored. The seventh section is the one Karimi describes with the most rigorous academic language in all her work. In it, she describes what Enki says about himself in this process, his role, and his anticipated participation in the return. Karimi does not quote this section verbatim. She describes it. She states that the seventh section contains Enki's description of what he calls his ongoing relationship with the world he helped create. This is not a past relationship, but a continuous, present-day one, in the administrative language of a status entry. In the seventh section of IM 96891, Enki describes his current situation in relation to the world and the civilization he created, and the situation he describes, in the administrative language of the Sumerian factual records, is neither departure, nor absence, nor distance. According to Karimi's summary, the situation he describes is what the Sumerian administrative vocabulary translates as present, in a way appropriate to current conditions. Present in a manner appropriate to the current conditions. The same vocabulary of change of state that appears in the description of the Anunnaki's state after the transition in MS 2855. They didn't leave. They changed their way of being here. The same vocabulary in a different first-person text. I didn't leave. I changed my way of being here. I am present in a manner appropriate to the current conditions. And when conditions become what I've described, the forgetting, the filling, the forgetting of the agreement, the way I am present will change again. The return won't come from somewhere else, but rather there will be a change in the way I am, moving from a way of being here to a way more directly engaged with the world. The last tablet of Enki is a state report written in the first person by the entity to whom Sumerian tradition attributes the founding of human civilization, the transmission of its foundational knowledge, the creation of the human species as a functional civilization rather than a scattered population, and the oversight of its development throughout the entire period documented in Sumerian texts. A situation report that describes the current conditions, describes the signal conditions, describes what happens when the signal conditions are met, describes the return, the emergence of those who were put in place to remain, the opening of what was sealed, the restoration of foundational knowledge, the recalibration of civilization, and the changed presence of the one who started it all. IM 96891 was buried beneath the foundations of a scribal school, the only building the Sumerians specifically designed for the preservation and transmission of knowledge. The tablet, which describes what happens when knowledge is finally ready to be fully restored, was placed beneath the institution whose purpose was to keep that knowledge alive until that moment. Not in the school itself, but under the foundations, where it would be protected by the building above and preserved by the weight of the institution itself. The tablet remained hidden, guarding a secret that was only to be revealed under very specific conditions. Al-Nashef, after dedicating 4 months to deciphering it, hailed it as an unparalleled find in his 4 decades of work. However, he chose silence and never published it. Weiss, for his part, attempted to document it visually, but was met with a firm refusal. Today, the translation has disappeared, and the original remains locked away in an unknown location. The text, supposedly dictated by Enki, is not a mere literary piece, it is a manual for the end times. In its opening lines, 3 inescapable requirements for a return are established: collective amnesia, the saturation of the system, and the definitive rupture of the original pact with the creators. The message is an invitation to look around us. Do we not live in a civilization that has lost its identity, whose systems have become ungovernable, and which has erased from its memory the fundamental agreement that gave rise to it? We must pay attention. Over 4,000 years ago, someone buried that tablet beneath the foundations of a scribe's school in Nippur with a clear purpose: to predict this very moment, to name our current reality, and to anticipate what is to come. We are living exactly what was written before history, as we know it, began.